Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalam ala ashrafil anbiya'i wal mursaleen. Muhammad wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'een. Amma ba'd, ikhwatul Islam ya ibadallah. I won't be too long-winded as relates to this clip that I'm doing. But I want to discuss a particular action, an action that's actually very pitiful, and that is to throw in people's faces that which you've done from them from acts of generosity, especially as it relates to one's wealth. If you bought something for someone, or if you gave a loan to someone, or just gave someone sadaqah, to throw that up in their face for whatever particular reason that a person is doing that. And this is a despicable characteristic for a person to have. I remember when I was banging, when I was a Crip, on the low end of the totem pole as it relates to intelligence and righteousness, right? When I was caught up in that stuff, I used to see people do that all the time, and I used to feel in my heart that when I would see people do that, that never was something that settled in my heart to be correct. It was just always a real pitiful character flaw that I would see, even when I was in that type of lifestyle, And so for a Muslim to exemplify that, or to fall into that, then this is without a doubt, the least that could be said is that it's not befitting. But without a doubt, what can be said about that is that the individual is falling into sin. That he is falling into sin. He or she, whoever may do that from amongst the Muslims. And this is what I mean when I say quite often that we have to allow the text to change our outlook on things. If we did that before Islam, for those who were into whatever they were into, if that was something that you did before you were practicing Islam, it definitely should not be something you're doing in Islam. Especially if you're opening the text of the Quran and the Sunnah, reading and allowing that which is found therein from guidance to shape your outlook on things. Now, in order to illustrate how this is a sin, then we take it right back to the book of Allah. Allah Tabarak wa Ta'ala, He teaches us in Surah Al-Baqarah, الَّذِينَ يُنْفِقُونَ أَمْوَالَهُمْ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ, those that spend their wealth in the path of Allah. ثُمَّ لَا يُتْبِعُونَ مَا أَنْفَقُوا مَنًّا وَلَا أَذَى, and they don't follow up that which they have spent with men. And we'll come to see what that means. And adha, which is harm, lahum ajruhum 'inda rabbihim, then for them is or their reward is with their Lord. Wala khawfun alayhim, and they will have no fear. Wala hum yahzanun, and they will not be grief stricken. They will not be grief stricken. Now, here it is. Allah Tabarak Ta'ala is telling us about two things that's connected to wealth. That you spend your wealth and you don't follow it up with these two things, men and harm, adha. Now, what is intended by that? I'm going to, right now, the tafsir of Imam al-Shawkani, alright, and Fathul al-Qadir, his famous tafsir, Fathul al-Qadir. And he says about al-man, and he states it is to mention the favor. I'm just translating. To mention the favor, that one bestows upon another, that gives to another, of course. And the intent of it is to mention it constantly or abundantly or multiple times, and to blame another by usage of it, of this repeating repeatedly bringing this up, that you're using it to blame someone, right? And then he continues, waqil, and it is said, and so some obviously scholars claim that or state that it also means it is to speak about what has been given to the point it reaches the giver, consequently harming him. So this is from a different perspective. This may be the one who was given something. He speaks about it in a way, in a manner, to the point where it reaches the giver, the one who actually gave, and it could be somewhat of a harm for him as a result of that. And so this is what al-man, what's intended by al-man in the verse. Mentioning the blessing, yani repeating it, and using that blessing as a means to blame the person who was given to. Like we find brothers blackmailing people. You may want something from a brother, or I don't want to say blackmail because it's not quite blackmail, but it's along those lines. And then they'll throw up in someone's face, oh, but brother, I did this for you. You know, I gave you X amount of dollars, $200 or $300 when you needed it. Remember that, brother? You know, throwing up their acts of generosity in a person's face, and it's from the perspective of like blaming them. And all of this is as a result of trying to get something from them. Trying to get something from them in that regard. So Allah Ta'ala, he states later on in the verse that comes after that, he states, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu la tubtilu amwalakum. La tubtilu sadaqatikum bil manni wal adha. Allah Ta'ala, he states, O you who believe, do not render worthless, for lack of better translations, your acts of charity by way of this men, by way of bringing up your acts of generosity in order to in a blameworthy fashion, in order to blame to blame the person who you were generous with. Do not nullify your charity in order to do this or to cause harm. كَالَّذِي يُنْفِقُ مَالَهُ, similar to he who spends his wealth رِئَاءَ النَّاسِ, to show off, or like what's the reason why he's spending his wealth? Because he's just showing off in front of the people. وَلَا يُؤْمِنُ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ, and he does not believe in Allah Ta'ala in the last day, to the end of the verse. The point here is that for the person that falls into this action, Allah Ta'ala is warning them, don't make worthless your sadaqah by doing this, by causing harm to another by way of your sadaqah, by constantly throwing it in a person's face in a blameworthy fashion, trying to blame him for something. And a lot of times, again, when we see this in the States, it's because the person is trying to get something from that other person. So they're throwing in the face of that individual their generous acts, the things that they did before. Almost kind of similar like they're trying to blackmail them. Trying to blackmail them with their generosity. Because what it really comes down to it is, if you did these things for Allah's sake, then if there comes a situation where you're in need, there would be no reason for you to throw in their face when you were generous with them. There would be no need for that. There would be no need for that. And so this is something that is repugnant. This type of action is repugnant. And that's also considered from the Kaba'ir, as Imam Shawkani mentioned in his tafsir. And so this is something that the brothers and sisters, for anyone that may have this with them, they want to stay away from, and Allah Ta'ala knows best. And I don't want to prolong the subject. I think what I just said is clear. So with that, subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.